Hey, what's up, everybody? Hammerheart Metal Reviews here once again. Today we're doing another discography ranking, and we're going to be talking about a subgenre of metal that I don't really spend a lot of time talking about and don't necessarily listen to a ton of bands in, and that is symphonic metal. I find the genre as a whole to be pretty hit or miss, mostly miss to be honest, but there are still a handful of bands in this genre of music that I do enjoy, and we're going to be talking about one of the best in the genre today, and that is EPICA. So if you are unfamiliar with this band, they are from the Netherlands. They've been around since the early 2000s. They're still going strong to this day. They have 9 full-length albums that I'm going to be ranking from my least favorite down to my favorite. I will say all of their albums are pretty good. Some of them are great. So you'll see which ones I think those are. They got their name after the Camelot album, so obviously took a lot of inspiration from that band and that album in particular. What I like about this band is that it's not just the purely symphonic stuff. They also bring in some elements of extreme metal with like the death metal style vocals by the guitarist Mark Jansen, which really pairs well with their lead vocalist Simone's operatic angelic voice, and it kind of got like the good and the evil, if you will, or like the dark and the light, if that makes sense. But really what they're known for is just creating these lush soundscapes with vast orchestral arrangements, really complex songwriting. And Simone's voice obviously carries these songs, really writes great vocal melodies that carry these tunes. And let's just get into this. Like I said, I don't think there's any bad albums in the bunch here. There's definitely some that I like a lot more than others, but even the ones that are at the bottom of my list here still have some redeeming qualities. They have yet to put out a completely bad album. But anyways, let's just get into this. Kicking off my list, my least favorite EPICA album is from 2016, The Holographic Principle. So even though, like I said, I'm putting this last, that's just because something had to come last. This album is still pretty decent. It's not bad by any stretch. It's just maybe not as stand out as some of their other material. To me, at least in my mind, this got sandwiched between 2 very good albums, and it just doesn't quite stack up to the album that preceded it or the one that followed right after it. Why I'm putting this one last is maybe just the guitar riffs aren't really as standout as on some other albums. Not really too riffy of an album. It's way more about the orchestrations, which really most of their songs are. But nonetheless, even though I'm going to say those couple negative things, this still has very catchy melodies, and Simone sounds great here. Her voice improved over time from the early days until now, and she sounds great here. There's still some really catchy songs here, like Beyond the Matrix. That's just always going to be stuck in your head once you listen to it. Edge of the Blade is pretty decent. So all in all, even though I'm putting it last, this isn't a terrible album. I would probably still give it like 7 out of 10. It's a decent album. It's just not one of their better albums. Up next in 8th, I'm going to 2012 with Requiem for the Indifferent. So this one followed a string of really great albums, and it kind of stands out for that reason, that it just wasn't quite on par with what came before it. But that being said, it is still pretty enjoyable. I found at this point in their discography that they were really getting more comfortable in their more modern commercial sound compared to their early days. They had slowly been building up their sound, and they really got comfortable as a band in what they were doing here. They really developed their sound and style over time. While I don't think this album quite stacks up to the albums that were before it, there's still some highs here. Some of the songs you could maybe consider are filler that aren't really as standout as others, but there's still some good stuff here. Storm the Sorrow is a pretty catchy song. The title track, Requiem for the Indifference, probably the best song on the album. But all in all, another one that I'd probably give like a 7 out of 10 to. Up next, we're going to go to their newest album, which is from 2025, Aspiral. So, like I said, this is their newest album. This almost started like a new era, or at least that's what the band said, that kind of they evolved their sound over time. This is a very accessible album, probably their most accessible album to date. Really brings in like a pop influence and approach on a lot of songs, which could sound negative, might deter me in general from enjoying an album, but This is so damn catchy and so full of hooks. Like, I enjoy this way more than maybe I thought I would when I heard that it had way more of a pop influence to it, but it's a lot of fun. These songs are really sing-alongable. They're, like I said, they're just full of hooks. All in all, a very enjoyable album. You still got some epics on here too, like Darkness Dies in Light is one of the standouts here. Then you got catchier, like more simple songs like Eye of the Storm, Cross the Divide was one of their singles. All in all, a pretty good album. All right, we're getting into even better stuff now. Up next in 6th, we're going to go all the way back to 2005 with their sophomore album, Consigned to Oblivion. So their early days really had a much different vibe than their later stuff does. There was just a different energy on display. Like, the production was a little bit different. The songwriting maybe wasn't as complex, but I really dig the vibe that their first few albums had. They were still maybe going through their maturation process. They were developing their sound. Like, yeah, the songwriting is not as complex as what would come later, but there's some all-time classic songs on this album, and I really think this is a solid album. You've got stuff like The Last Crusade, the title track Consigned to Oblivion to close it off, Blank Infinity. All in all, one of their early albums, and it is a standout, a solid album. Now we're into the top 5, my 5 favorites by the band. In 5th place, we're going to go to 2014 with The Quantum Enigma. So this is the follow-up to Requiem for the Indifferent, and it's the album before The Holographic Principle, and I think it is better than both those albums. Clearly, I already talked about those. I'm putting this in 5th. This one just is so epic. It's just complex layering of all the symphonics and orchestrations, and it just really helps build these songs up with epic climaxes, and great vocal melodies are really what carry these songs. That's really what they're known for. But yeah, I just found this one a really, like, a major step up from Requiem for the Indifferent, and they really delivered a solid album here. Great songs like Victims of Contingency, Unchained Utopia, the title track, The Quantum Enigma, is great as well. All in all, pretty solid album. We're starting to get into the better albums here, and let's keep this going with even better stuff. So in 4th place, going to go with their second newest album from 2021, Omega. So this was their 8th album overall. After The Quantum Enigma, then it was The Holographic Principle, and then Omega kind of tied together that storyline or concept of those few albums. And this one I just found front to back is so goddamn catchy. It's some of their best songwriting that they have done to date, and it's really just on full display here. Really everything that I just said about The Quantum Enigma you could apply to this album as well, but I like this one a little bit more. The songs stand out a little bit more, and really compared to like the Holographic Principle album that was right before this, it was a huge step up and a nice return to form. Abyss of Time, absolutely amazing song. Kingdom of Heaven Part 3. Rivers is even like an excellent ballad. They always throw in a nice ballad, and this one is one of their best for sure. All in all, a very solid album. All right, now we're into the top 3. This is where it kind of goes a notch above. Everything else that I just talked about was good, but now this is where it gets into the great albums, at least in my opinion. If I'm in an EPICA mood, these 3 albums are the ones that I would go to the majority of the time. But really, like I said, you can't really go wrong with any other stuff if you're into symphonic metal. But if you're unfamiliar with the band, start with these next 3 albums. So in 3rd place, going to 2009 with their 4th album, Design Your Universe. So yeah, at this point they had really settled into their like newer modern sound. They kind of had a more commercial approach with cleaner production and more complex arrangements. It just, compared to the early albums, you can hear a like noticeable difference in the overall sound, but they were really starting to come into their own here and just delivered a knockout album. Really solid stuff. Sorry, I can't talk. Best tracks here: Kingdom of Heaven, Martyr of the Free World, Unleashed. But really front to back, this whole album is pretty killer. Even features a guest appearance by Tony Kakko from Sonata Arctica, so that's a nice surprise as you get near the tail end of the album when his vocals come in. Just, yeah, all in all, a very solid album. Easy choice for my top 3. What's even better than that? In 2nd place, I'm going to go all the way back to their debut from 2003, The Phantom Agony. So this is the album that started it all for the band. At this point, there was really a lot of like Nightwish comparisons, and appropriately so. at this point, like, their songwriting was not as complex as what would come later. It's kind of straightforward and to the point, but I really dig the energy here. They've just got this youthful exuberance and like excitement about playing these songs, and it really comes through in the music. And it just really, front to back, is just a really enjoyable symphonic journey into EPICA's world. The journey that they take you on this album is excellent, and like I said, it's just about the vibe. It's not necessarily that the songwriting is better than what would come later, but it's just the energy and the execution here. It makes it stand out and stands the test of time. You got all-time classics like Sensorium, Cry for the Moon, the title track, The Phantom Agony, which they have a music video for as well. All in all, a very solid debut album. Just missed out on being in my top spot. I put it in second because there's one album that is easily their best, at least in my opinion, to my tastes, and that is their third album, which is from 2007, The Divine Conspiracy. So to me, like I said, this is hands down the best thing they've ever did and probably ever will do. I don't think any of their other albums hold a candle to this one. This is just like a step above the rest. It's kind of a nice bridge between the style of the first two albums and then what would follow on like Design Your Universe. It kind of has some elements of the early stuff and what would follow as well, but there's just so much goodness here. It's so epic. If you haven't heard the band before, this is a great starting point to give them a chance, especially if you're not really into symphonic metal and maybe like haven't really wanted to explore this style of music. Go give this album a chance. If you don't like it, hey, it's not for you, and that's fair enough. I don't like a lot of symphonic metal bands, but this album is different. It just has something special about it. The best songs on here, The Obsessive Devotion, Chasing the Dragon is probably the best ballad they've ever done. Fools of Damnation is possibly my favorite track on the album, but really front to back, this whole thing is awesome. Easily my favorite album by the band. So anyways, those are just my thoughts and opinions as usual. If you're a fan of the band, I would love to get your ranking down below. Let me know what your favorites are. What are your least favorites? Do you agree with what I had to say? Do you disagree? Totally all good. Let me know how stupid I am down below. That's all good too. If you haven't listened to the band before, maybe this will give you a chance to go explore their albums and give you a good starting point to do so. But yeah, anyways, enough rambling, enough talking. Until next time, Hammerheart Metal Reviews out.